Donald Trump marks 100 days in office as the 47th president on Tuesday, and I know for many of you it probably feels a lot longer. But it's only been 3 months and 10 days since Trump was sworn in as the 47th commander-in-chief, becoming just the second president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. Trump's biggest success, without question, is on the issue of immigration. Under his predecessor, President Joe Biden, millions of undocumented migrants came across the border over his 4 years. But Trump has basically rendered it a non-issue. According to border czar Tom Homan earlier this week, fewer than 12,000 encounters were reported at the southern border in February, and about 11,000 were reported in March. Meanwhile, 139,000 undocumented migrants have been deported since January 20th, with the administration focusing on those accused of committing crimes, such as sexual assault or even homicide. However, in politics, it is possible to do too good a job with something. Now, with Trump essentially rendering the border a non-issue in his first 100 days, disgruntled Americans might turn their focus to other issues that they have less in common with the president on. Poll after poll has shown that Americans are not fans of Trump's stewardship of the economy, and the action that they have the biggest problem with are Trump's suite of so-called Liberation Day tariffs that were announced April 2nd. 10% import duties on just about everything that comes into this country from overseas. The president also initially announced tailored tariffs that would go into effect immediately, but reversed his position after the stock market reacted with one of the biggest drops in modern history. Since Trump took office, the market has erased nearly $4 trillion in value, causing anxiety for many Americans who rely on their 401ks to secure their retirement. Now, there has been some good economic news for the Trump administration. Inflation reports for February and March indicate that prices are going up slower than most economists expected. However, if they can't get one-for-one trade deals done with America's biggest economic partners by the early summer, expect high prices to take effect again, and Trump will be faced with the same political crisis that bedeviled his predecessor, Joe Biden. The signature foreign issue of Trump's first 100 days has been the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which marked its 3rd anniversary on February 24th. 4 days later, President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance got into a stunning shouting match with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, while Zelensky was in the Oval Office to lobby for additional aid. Now, during the 2024 campaign, Trump pledged to bring the Ukraine-Russia war to an end on his first day in office. Obviously, that hasn't happened. Ironically, while Ukraine has been more willing to negotiate a potential ceasefire with the new administration, Trump has been decidedly more solicitous of Russia, holding back on imposing new sanctions and speaking kindly about Russian President Vladimir Putin wherever possible. In fact, being much harsher on Zelensky than on Putin, in a reversal of what the Biden administration had to say. The Trump administration has also spent months trying to hammer out a deal with Ukraine to provide the U.S. with proceeds from that country's rare mineral deposits, which Trump sees as providing a security guarantee for the Kyiv government. However, various iterations of the deal have been passed around Washington and Kiev for more than 2 months now, but there's little sign that officials are any closer to actually putting ink to paper. Staying in the foreign policy realm, Trump has been bedeviled by crises at the Pentagon, where he appointed former Fox News personality Pete Hegseth to serve as Secretary of Defense. In March, the administration was rocked by the revelation that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz had inadvertently added Atlantic editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg to a Signal chat where officials including Hegseth, Waltz, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio were discussing airstrikes against the Houthis in Yemen. Now, in past administrations, this might have been a resigning or firing offense. But Trump has stood by Hegseth, telling The Atlantic magazine in an interview published this week that he had a talk with his defense secretary and expressed confidence that Hegseth would get it together, which sounds to this reporter like damning with faint praise the person who's run the United States military for more than 3 months now. Trump's first 100 days have been action-packed, and it's hard not to argue that he's taken many of the actions that he ran on during the 2024 campaign. However, it's a well-recognized trope in politics that voters like one action in theory, but don't like it in practice. Trump is finding that out once again, and with the 2026 midterms coming up fast, Republicans are hoping that the stock market gets turned around, that the administration is able to reach trade deals with America's biggest economic partners, and that maybe, just maybe, Russia and Ukraine figure out a way to end that bloody war.
For more stories just like these, be sure to subscribe to the New York Post right here on YouTube.